Welcome to Illustration and Media Digital Applications. This is Module 4, Unit 4.2, using the view and camera commands for plans and elevations. Today, we'll be producing line and X-ray drawings. We'll be placing and changing the field of view of our camera. And finally, we'll be exporting sketchy output files and line drawings. I'm Sherry McKinley. Let's get started. So today we're going to be looking at all of our view and camera commands that can really help us to have a lot of variety in the kinds of drawings that we produce. And we're going to start today with the view drop-down menu and see what we have here. Now, we did touch on this in our last lesson on the edge styles. We're going to go ahead and try all of these today just to see what the effects are and what kind of output that we can have when we export our drawing. Let's turn on the back edges. You'll see that we get hidden geometry there. I'm just going to orbit a little bit as well just so you can see all of that. Now, this back edges option is kind of interesting if you want to produce a drawing that shows sort of the construction of the object itself. Pretty effective and interesting looking when you're using this for kitchens. So it's a consideration there. Let's also turn on the profile edges. This will really darken everything quite a bit. So we get a bit of a contour around all of our objects there for that one. Next, we're going to turn on depth Q, very, very subtle. And finally, our extension lines. We just get a couple of extra ones there. So this is an option, is to have a really, really sketchy drawn type, sort of a really sketchy look. With all the outlines on, you can certainly use this. Now, what if I don't actually want any materials? I just want a line drawing. Well, I can certainly do that as well. That's also found under the View menu, and that's called Face Style. Let's go through each of these. Let's click on monochrome or monochromatic at the very bottom. You can see that I can export out a grayscale, very simple sort of rendering. The one that we've been using is shaded with textures, where you can actually see the texture on the floor in the wood and certain textures in the glass. The one with shaded with textures, though, can slow down your work. So if you have a very large file and it's starting to get a little bit slow, then you might actually not work with that on until you're at the very end of your drawing. In that case, you might just choose shaded. Now, shaded is very similar, but you can see that we've lost the texture of the wood. Next, we have hidden line. Now, with all of our edges on, our profile, extension, and outline edges, we can actually get a line drawing. Now, I could simply print this at this point. I could hand render it. I could export it and add notes to it. So we do have an option to do that. Then we have wireframe, which gives us every line. And finally, X-ray. Now, I love X-ray, but I love to use X-ray with my shaded with textures on. So you can see it's not an option until we give our drawing a face. So let's go ahead and choose shaded with textures. And then we're going to choose the additional one called X-ray. So we can have X-ray selected with the other shaded with textures on. So let's do that. Now, X-ray gives an interesting effect. We get to see through the materials, but we still see the outside surface as well. It's like every object has a transparent surface. Now, there's two reasons that I would use this. One is I think it gives an interesting transition to a final result of a more photorealistic rendering. And the second reason I use that for X-ray is I can see through my walls. So if I had to draw a line, for example, and I needed it to start from the back edge, then I can actually see that, and I can kind of see through that. So sometimes while I'm working, I will turn my X-ray on. What we're going to do next is take a look at some of the additional styles that we have in SketchUp. It's found in a different location and it's not under the View menu. So we've exhausted our options here with Edge Style and Face Style. Do enjoy that, have fun with that. But there's some additional ones under the Window menu, and you'll see a location here called Styles. Let's click on that. Now you'll see that what we have in front of us, I've gone back to my shaded with textures and I have kept my outlines on. I'm going to make sure that all of my edges, including profiles and extension, I just want all of my edges on for this next part. Now what we can do is after we click on Window and then Styles, we can change to some various different styles that we have here. Let's try some of them. We'll first try Assorted Styles. And in each of these windows is a different option of different kinds of sketchy looks, etc. Let's click on the brush strokes on canvas. You can see that we get that look. That could be something that we export out and save. We have chipboard with fine marker. It's kind of nice. This one's called Generic CAD, so it looks a little more technical. Just going through and clicking on a few of them. Oh, that one's fun. That's pencil on tracing paper, so it kind of sketches out the lines as though it's been sketched first and then rendered. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on each of these. I want you to do the same. Okay, when we're done seeing all of the various options that we have here, it's important that we go back to Styles. Just want to find Default Styles, Default Styles, and the second window in is Default Style again, and we're back to normal. So have fun with that. If there's any of those that you would like, you would simply go back to the File menu, export out a 2D graphic, and you could save that JPEG to your computer to modify later. Now we're about to put the last 3 units together, and we're going to export out a 2-dimensional elevation. It's only going to be a line drawing. It's going to have dimensions on it, and my goal is that we can produce something a little more technical from SketchUp that's 2-dimensional, etc. Now what I'm going to get us to do in the beginning is something a little bit strange, but you'll notice when we did produce those elevations, we have, the green or the gray background, whatever version of SketchUp you're using, whether it's Pro or whatever template you're using will give us that background. Now I like to have, if I'm doing a line drawing in SketchUp, I would prefer for my lines to be black and my background to be white. So sometimes what I will do is draw a background for myself that's white. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a rectangle behind this wall here, as large as I can get it, and I'm going to elevate that up quite high, and I'm going to go a little bit below as well. Now you'll see what that will do later. It's a simple rectangle. It doesn't matter the distance because we're going to produce an elevation of this wall back here that we did before, but it will be a line drawing only. So we have a white backdrop now. It will look more technical. Now, let's go ahead and do what we learned a couple of lessons ago, which is to go to the Tools menu and select Section Plane. We're going to choose on the back wall as being the wall that we're going to produce an elevation for, so click. We'll zoom out a little bit. go to our select tool and click on that line on the section plane and move it. And we're only going to move it as far as there. We don't want any of that furniture in this elevation. Then we're going to toggle off our section plane under the view menu by clicking on that. Next, camera, standard view. Oh, I didn't remember which one it was. Standard views, I think it's the right view. There we go. Then we're going to zoom a window around it and zoom out a little bit. And finally, this is all review, we are going to the camera menu and choosing parallel projection. Now, can you see how we have a nice white backdrop now to this elevation? And by the time we change it into a line drawing, it's going to look much, much better. So let's now go to the view menu and change our face style to hidden line. Great. We see all the lines there. Let's make sure that the edges that we have on are the ones that we want to have on. I'm going to turn on profile edges to darken the things that are closer to me. And if I wanted the back edges, doesn't make a difference in this drawing. I think I only see a dashed line there. Well, I think I'll leave it there. If it's hidden geometry, great. Next thing I'm going to do is begin my dimensions. Now remember, we want to be in the correct layer for these dimensions. So I'm going to go under the window menu, select layers, and I'm going to turn on my elevation dimensions. And oh yes, we did this in the last tutorial. So we already have those dimensions there, and I'm ready to export. Isn't that wonderful? So then I'll simply go File, Export, 2D Graphic, call it Line Elevation, make sure it's a JPEG, and export. To complete today's lesson, we're going to look at a final effect under the camera menu that will help us with our 3D drawings now. So we're going to get out of this whole 2D graphic and go back to our 3D model. Now let's backtrack. We're going to go to Window and Layers. We're going to set a new layer as Current, turn off our dimensions and close that window. We're going to go to View and our face style and back to shaded with textures. We're going to zoom out a little bit. We're basically backtracking again. Go to our camera menu, go from parallel projection back to perspective. Great. Go to our view menu, turn on our section plane, select, click, and edit and delete our section plane. So we're back to our 3D model. Now let's review some of the 3D effects that we have, and I'm going to add one to it. We're going to zoom a little bit closer to our work. What I typically do to make my drawing look as realistic as I can in SketchUp is I certainly do play with my edges. And I'm going to turn off the back edges, and I'm going to turn off the profile edges just to keep it simple. And I like to get into my space, so I use my panning to try to put myself at eye level. Of course, I use my orbiting to get the most realistic view, and I try to avoid having SketchUp sky showing in any area because that certainly reminds me that I'm looking at a model. So that's the first thing I play around with, zooming and making sure I'm in a good position. But one additional way, especially if you're in a really small space, is to try the camera field of view. It's a little bit of a cheater. It's like widening a picture or widening a photograph to make something look larger. But it's a great trick in illustration. So we're going to go to camera field of view here. And we're going to drag and hold our left mouse button down on our screen. You can see when I drag and hold that, I'm stretching my walls. It looks like I'm zooming, but you'll notice I'm essentially stretching everything. So here's when I drag up and in, I reduce it. And if I drag down and out, I'm stretching my space. So that will make it look larger. At that point, I can orbit and zoom and pan until I'm satisfied with my view, and it enables me to see as much as I possibly can. At that point, I would basically turn my shadows on Great, great, that looks pretty good. And I would turn my edges off. And we're going to export that.